She was just walking along the shoreline. No metal detector, no plan, no expectations. Walks like this in Alaska don't promise surprises. They're about solitude, cold air, and the steady sound of the ocean that clears your head. The gray sky hung low, pressing down, the air heavy with moisture, the wind cutting across her face, reminding her that humans are only visitors here. Waves rolled in slowly and without emotion, repeating the same motion they had performed for centuries. She walked along the waterline, carefully stepping over wet stones, sometimes stopping just to stare out into the distance. In places like this, people don't usually find things. They lose things. Energy, time, illusions. And that was exactly why the object lying near the edge of the water felt wrong. A glass bottle, not modern trash, not plastic. Thick, cloudy glass with air bubbles trapped inside. The kind made long ago. She could have walked right past it. Most people would have, but the bottle was intact. No cracks, no chips. Waves polish stone smooth, but glass rarely survives that kind of punishment. This one did. She picked it up and felt the unexpected weight, then noticed the cork. Real, sealed tight, not decorative, not accidental. Inside was something rolled up. Paper. In that moment, the walk ended because objects like this don't appear by accident. The ocean can take endlessly, but it rarely gives anything back. And when it does, it's usually for a reason. She didn't yet know what she was holding, but she could already feel it. This wasn't just an object. It was a message delayed by decades. At home, the bottle sat untouched for a long time. She placed it on the table and didn't approach it right away, as if afraid of breaking the fragile balance between past and present. Finds like this demand silence. When she finally reached for the cork, it resisted. Dried wood holding firm as though protecting what was inside. Opening it didn't feel exciting. It felt intrusive. The paper inside was astonishingly dry, yellowed, fragile, but whole. The ink had faded, yet the words were still readable. It was a letter, a real one, not a replica, not a trick. At the top was a date, clear, undeniable, a date from another time. Below it, a reference to a war, the kind now discussed in textbooks, but once lived through in fear and uncertainty. The author wrote plainly, without drama or slogans. He wrote about the cold, the fear, and not knowing whether he would ever return home. He wasn't writing for history. He was writing because he wanted someone someday to know that he existed. Every sentence felt disturbingly recent. That was the most unsettling part. She read the letter again and again before allowing herself to react. Then came the verification, archives, historical documents, maps, timelines. Everything matched too precisely to be coincidence. The paper fit the era, the ink fit the time, the language fit the war. This letter should not have survived. Paper doesn't survive water. Time erases memory. And yet it had survived. That's when she realized she wasn't just the finder, she was the final recipient. And now she faced a choice: keep this as a private secret or let the story move forward to someone who could preserve it properly. The moment she decided not to keep it to herself, everything changed. The bottle stopped being a quiet discovery and became a responsibility. She photographed it carefully in natural light, without embellishment, without filters. The glass, the cork, the paper still partially rolled as if resisting the present. She didn't post it publicly. She didn't want noise. Instead, she reached out quietly to historians, archivists, people who worked with maritime artifacts and wartime correspondence. The replies came slowly at first, cautious, almost skeptical. Messages asking for clearer photos, questions about where exactly it was found, how far from the waterline, whether the cork showed signs of modern sealing. Each question forced her to relive the moment again, to reconstruct every step, every detail, every decision that led her to pick it up. As more information was shared, the tone of the replies shifted. Skepticism turned into attention, attention into concern. One historian warned her not to open the letter further to limit exposure to air. Another explained how rare it was for paper to survive prolonged exposure to a marine environment without catastrophic damage. Someone else pointed out that the type of glass used in the bottle was consistent with a narrow window of production decades ago. None of them said it outright, but the implication was clear. This wasn't a novelty. It was an anomaly. She began to understand that the bottle hadn't just survived time, it had slipped through it. Days turned into weeks as experts cross-referenced dates, handwriting styles, phrasing common to that specific conflict. One detail stood out repeatedly: the author's tone. He wasn't performing heroism. He wasn't writing for posterity. He sounded like someone who believed he might not survive and wanted proof that he had existed at all. That made the letter heavier than any artifact. It carried intent. As the verification deepened, she felt a growing tension. Not excitement, not greed, pressure, because every confirmation narrowed her options. Museums would want it cataloged, universities would want it studied, collectors would want it preserved. Quietly, and with each path came consequences. Public exposure risked sensationalism. Private handling risked obscurity. She realized that whatever she chose next would define the letter's future more than the ocean ever had. One message arrived late one night, different from the others. It was brief, respectful, from someone who had spent decades studying wartime correspondence and preserving fragile documents that couldn't survive institutional handling. He didn't ask for publicity. He didn't ask for speed. He asked for care. And for the first time since the bottle left the shore, she felt something close to relief, because the past wasn't asking to be displayed, it was asking to be understood. The conversation moved slowly, deliberately, as if both sides understood that haste could ruin everything. There were no negotiations yet, no numbers, no urgency, only questions, careful, precise, almost academic. He wanted to know how the bottle had been handled, whether the letter had been fully removed, how long it had been exposed to air, what the temperature had been when she found it. These weren't the questions of a buyer, they were the questions of someone who had lost artifacts before and wasn't willing to lose another. She followed his instructions exactly: minimal handling, controlled humidity, no unnecessary light. Each step made the object feel less like something she owned and more like something she was temporarily guarding. At the same time, doubt crept in. Once she let it go, it would never come back. The bottle would leave her hands, her apartment, her daily life. It would become part of someone else's world, cataloged, archived, studied. She asked herself whether she was ready for that, whether she was giving up something irreplaceable. But then she reread the letter again, not for facts, not for verification, but for meaning. The writer hadn't intended the letter to stay hidden forever. He had thrown it into the ocean with the hope, however small, that someone would find it. That realization reframed everything. Keeping it locked away would be safer for her, but unfair to the story. Over several calls, the historian explained how he planned to preserve it: stabilized glass, controlled environment, digitization without altering the original, no exhibitions, no headlines, just long-term survival. Trust formed not through promises, but through restraint. When he finally said he was prepared to take responsibility for it, she felt the weight shift. The decision was no longer about money or ownership. It was about whether she was willing to become the person who closed the circle, the one who carried the letter from the shore to its final resting place. And once she accepted that role, the outcome became inevitable. The final step didn't feel dramatic. There was no countdown, no sudden moment of excitement. The bottle was packed carefully, layer by layer, as if each movement acknowledged how far it had already traveled, not in distance, but in time. The letter was stabilized, protected, documented. She watched the process with a strange mix of detachment and responsibility, fully aware that once it left her hands, the story would no longer belong to her in the same way. The historian handled it without reverence and without indifference. the balance that only comes from experience. He spoke not about value, but about survival, about how many similar letters never made it past their first decade, let alone a lifetime. How many stories dissolved because no one happened to be walking along the right shore at the right moment. Only then did she fully understand the scale of coincidence. See, the letter had crossed an ocean, survived storms, salt, cold, and time itself, only to end up within reach of someone willing to stop and look down. Paper should not outlive war, glass should not outlast decades of waves, and yet here it was. The transaction, when it finally happened, was quiet, no witnesses, no announcement, just confirmation that the bottle would be preserved, studied, and kept intact, not as an object of spectacle, but as evidence that a single human voice can travel farther than anyone expects. When the exchange was complete and the space on her table was empty again, the silence felt different, heavier, calmer. She didn't feel like she had sold something. She felt like she had returned something that had been waiting to be delivered for a very long time. In the end, the collector paid $8,000, not for glass or paper, but for the privilege of keeping a story alive. How did you like the story, friends? Share your thoughts in the comments.